All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Hi, Elizabeth. How are
Hi,
you?
David. I am good. And man, the US government, the Trump administration,
Yeah.
there's never a dull moment. It's always something. I mean, it feels like drinking from a freaking fire
Yeah.
hose right now.
But at the
It's
same,
always something.
yeah. But it's,
Was it last
I
week
know,
was Maduro?
Venezuela.
Like,
Yeah.
jeez.
But it's scary. It is
Yeah.
scary because why it's scary? There is a word for this, I believe, psychologist. Your dad, Ross, we know
Hmm.
this one for sure. And this one has to do with the man, I draw a blank on the word because it's a scientific term
Hmm.
and confiscation. Oh, I wish I could. It's just
I
because
mean,
it's not an easy term.
narcissism.
No, 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 no. This one has to do when someone doesn't realize, not
Mhm.
intentionally, he just doesn't realize that his brain or her brain is fighting from within to decipher between what's factual and what is not.
Right. Right.
That is where that particular there's a specific word for it. If I ever find it later, I'll
Mhm.
I'll share it with the community. But that's what it is, and this is what the scary part about this Greenland issue. This is
Well,
what's scary part about it.
so it's been very interesting because presidents a lot typically happens in a president's term,
Hmm.
but when Trump came into office, I mean, he like started the hitting the ground with so much change in such a short
Yeah.
amount of time. And so right now, I mean, we're watching these things. I mean, even if the international court could do something about it, which
Yeah.
I mean they really can't, but let's say they could do something about it, it's
Hmm.
like one thing after another thing after another thing after another thing, and it's happening so quickly. It really makes you wonder what's really going on here. Is this part of a much bigger play? Is it
Yeah.
what fundam and I think that's really the question that we're asking, because back in the day, and I use this as an example because I was very young, but I did live through the Iraq war on terror, and
Yeah.
all the Middle Eastern conflicts, right? All the wars that more or less the United States went into Afghanistan and Iraq, and what they did for you and my husband more than anybody know what they did, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that there was like a concerted effort around that to try and manipulate you into thinking that this was a good idea, right? And they did it because of democracy. Right, there's democracy, and there's the war on terror, and there's weapons of mass destruction, and all of these things, right? Now there's not even necessarily that narrative. When Trump is talking about acquiring Greenland, he's flat out saying, hey, we need this for shipping routes, and we need
Yeah.
this because China is a really big threat, which
Yeah.
that's its own thing that we can discuss. But he's
Yeah.
being straight up about this is economics driven. This is not democracy. The people of Greenland don't need democracy, right? So he's actually being, I
Yeah.
don't want to say honest, because I don't believe we are not getting the full picture. Something else is
Yeah.
happening, and we're not getting the full picture, but at least he is being honest about the fact that it is economically driven,
Yeah.
and not some like nebulous like democracy or some other like bullshit. This
Yeah.
is flat out economics.
Yeah.
It may be something that we don't know yet. Like there may be another component we don't know yet, but this is flat out economics.
Yeah.
It's flat out, we want to beat China. There are these Arctic shipping routes that are emerging, and the mineral resources are absolutely insane.
Yeah. I just found out the word that I was looking for, and
Oh, what
that's
is it?
called, yeah, confabulation. And confabulation
Yeah.
is an intentional
Mhm.
creation of a falsehood or a distorted memories. Here's the key, just for the community, for you to know
Yeah.
this. This is when a person believes that these fabrications are true. Often, what is this? Is to fill a gap in memory
Mhm.
due to either brain injury, or conditions like dementia. And this is what they call it sometimes the honest lying,
Yeah.
because there is no intent to deceive. And sometimes these false memories, it's what can range from some sort of a minor detail
Yeah.
to elaborate stories. And that's sort of occur spontaneously. This is what, I mean, your dad will know much better about this since his background is in brain chemistry. It will make more sense for this one. So this is part of the issue. But you're absolutely correct. You touch on one of the key aspects of this about what's in it about this Greenland. And one of the key things, beside what you mentioned, is also aimed at China. Because what happened in Venezuela, it was also aimed at China specifically. Greenland is no different. Of course, this one, you think about it in terms of the investments that China has put in, even though it's now almost being halted. And there is a reason for that, because you have to know where things are. So China, this indeed shows some significant interest in investing in Greenland. In what sector? In the mineral resources, especially the two elements, rare earth and uranium. So,
right.
This is again, China has already started the investments in infrastructure. I was aware of certain aspects of airports and ports, and this was part of China's Polar Silk Road.
Yes.
And a strategy, and this is exactly why the US all of a sudden, just out of the blue, with Trump, we are now interested in Greenland.
Well, so Trump's actually been talking about acquiring Greenland from his first term. So this isn't the first time, and it's actually not the first time that the United States has tried to acquire Greenland. So it's actually tried to acquire Greenland over the last 150 years. It's just, for whatever reason, Denmark, for example, has believed that it was very mineral rich, important, whatever, but hasn't given it up, right? So, and people talk about, because it's not unheard of to sell land, right? To sell parts of continents. That's not unheard of. That's actually a fairly normal thing. I mean, it's why we have Alaska. It's why we have the US Virgin Islands. I mean, that land was sold to us by other countries. The difference is that those were willing sellers. Right now, we're looking at Greenland, more or less, which is its own. I mean, yes, it is technically Denmark, but it is its own sovereign governance, right? They have the bulk of their governance is their own, and they don't want to be purchased, and Denmark doesn't want to sell it.
Yeah. Well, that's why, for example, you have to think in terms of the strategic importance of Denmark. Of Greenland, that is. So, but again, I'm going to be tying it for now to the China's investments, because China has started major investments. But the problem for China right now is that these investments are being blocked. Because you think about there are Chinese firms that have invested, for example, I'm aware of two, that in the exploration of zinc, that's one, and the iron ore.
Yes.
But for the China's investments in the infrastructure, which started, but now is coming to a complete halt, where about the airports, the development of ports, and those even the bidding for it, we're blocked or withdrawn. Why? Because the US has pressured Denmark to do so, because Greenland gets money from the Danish government for its support. So the whole idea of this is to understand that this didn't start last year or started when Trump announced this. This goes back to almost 2021. I remember reading one white paper regarding this because the Chinese were involved at that time regarding the uranium mine, but the US pressured Denmark back in 2021, which in return pressured Greenland to sort of oppose this uranium mining. And this is where you see the connections between the US and Denmark regarding this. But now this opening up a much bigger problem. And the bigger problem is this. If the United States move forward with this, okay, that's like almost, there is no other way of saying it, that's like invading another country. What is Article 5 in NATO charter says.
Yes. Okay. So there's a couple of different pieces here. So I want to speak to some of the things you already said, because it's important to to talk about exactly what investments China has. Okay. So let me share. First of all, this is the screenshot that was on the thumbnail.
Greenland, US territory.
Trump shared this, President Trump, because he is the president, shared this image yesterday. It's 6 a.m. because he's in Davos. So it's also, David, important. I think we should also share some of what he said at Davos, because he actually addressed whether, I mean, granted, he could say one thing one moment and literally the next day or the next hour completely go back on that and change his mind, right? So that just because he said something doesn't make it true, but it is important to pay attention to at least what he's saying, okay? So, and this is established 2026, right? So he's looking in the very, very near term future. This is something that's very aggressively happening. So I did want to share that, but you were talking about what China actually does own in Greenland, because even President Trump, I'm going to pull up another one. Let me share this instead. So this is another post that he made, and we're talking about, Jesus, it's very long. Okay. It's very, very long, but, and we'll dive into it a little bit more in a bit, but he is specifically talking about safety, security, and survival of our planet. So like acquiring Denmark by the United States, he is equating to survival of the planet. So I think we need to dive into that too, because that's a pretty, that I do not personally believe that it is in the survival of our planet for the US to acquire Denmark, or for the US to acquire Greenland, but he thinks so. So we're going to dive into that too, because that's a super bold statement. But let's look really quickly at what China actually does own. So there are a couple of huge things. So this is, let me share this tab instead. And I apologize if I pronounce this incorrectly. This is Shanghe Resources. So let me share this tab if you guys can see it. This is Shanghe Resources Holding Company Limited, and they are a really big. They're a really big deal because they are about a 10% shareholder in Greenland Minerals, and they're developing specifically the. Oh my! I absolutely apologize. I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Kvanegeld.
Whatever that is.
Kvanegeld. Sorry, guys. But it's rare earth mining. And so that is a really big thing. They in 2014 they had a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, with Greenland Mineral Energies to create a fully integrated global rare earth supply chain. Okay. So this is more than just China, like you brought up, David. They're looking to really build out the polar part of the Silk Road. And then I also want to, there's a Hong Kong General Nice Group also for iron ore. There was a naval base that General Nice Group, they were going to buy a naval base, and Denmark's PM, Lars Rasmussen, personally intervened to block the sale on behalf of the United States. So this has actually been going on for a long time. There is a ton of infrastructure that has been built, and a lot of stuff that's been blocked. So Denmark blocked airport constructions that were valued at $500 million. I mean, they've blocked all kinds of stuff to try and prevent China's expansion into Greenland, but they obviously have not fully blocked it.
Yeah. Well, it's the idea of what the U.S. is doing, because the concern about, as a matter of fact, I saw the statements by the Treasury Secretary
Yes.
about how China now is going to hold us hostage to these microchips. Well, wait a minute. Aren't you the one who created the problem to begin with? You know, let's just call the facts as we see them.
Yes.
So, and the idea that we were expecting this is, again, well, I'm not going to repeat myself because we talked about this before. I'm not going to be repeating myself about how wrong was Trump. He miscalculated, because the assumption was, I'm going to pressure Chinese, they're going to back down. No, they end up pushing back. And he didn't expect that kind of reaction. And in Greenland, I'm convinced also has to do with the Chinese. Has nothing to do with the security of Denmark or security of NATO or whatever. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump lashed out on NATO in Davos during this, which is, we all know what that summit is all about anyway. But at least you give him credit on one aspect. And like I said yesterday during my live stream that I did yesterday about NATO, NATO is a relic of the past. Is just useless. They just need to get rid of it. So for Donald Trump, if he's going to be just talking, he needs to act. If you're talking about, well, NATO is useless, whatever, go ahead and remove the U.S. out of it. To me, it's not about just talking, it's about acting. And when you look at this Greenland issue, you have to think about the strategic aspects of it, long term. And when I say Donald Trump is nothing but a tool. It's not Donald Trump that is. Donald Trump is just.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's the power be behind the scenes. And there are the three elements that we need to consider. It's the sort of the Arctic security. You think about the security landscape in the Arctic, how it's changing already. And the US doesn't have a say into that. You think about the resources acquisition, which is exactly why we wanted to prevent the Chinese from doing. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And the third element has to do with the strategic shipping and trade routes.
Absolutely.
Those are the three. There is no other. But literally, take a step back and ask yourself, will Mr. Trump, or can Mr. Trump think at that level? Let's just be, no offense to the guy. I'm not degrading the, no. It's just, I'm stating the fact. Can Donald Trump think in those terms of a strategic thinking? This is what I'm saying. What Trump is saying is just word of mouth. It's the power be behind the scenes that are pushing this narrative.
Well, so like I said, and credit, I mean, I guess in a sense, credit where it's due, because you're right. And even the Trump administration is actually talking about the shipping lane issue. So this is one of the most interesting things for me, because as you know, I don't know whether the climate is changing or not. There seems to be evidence that it is, but then, you know, there's also the other side of it is, you know, we're watching governments and high net worth individuals who would be in the know about that do flat out nothing. And so what we're watching is, as the bad thing is happening, right? As the Arctic ice is melting, instead of there being a concerted effort to, you know, rebuild the ice, instead of that, what we're watching is countries now start to fight over the shipping lanes that are being uncovered by the ice melting. Okay. So that is, I don't even know what to say about that necessarily. Like, either it's, and I've said this before, either it is true and we have the most irresponsible politicians and wealthy people in history, which is very possible. Okay, that's very possible. Either that's true or it's not true, and everyone is basically being lied to and the wool is being pulled over their eyes over this. But let's talk about the Northwest Passage, because David, do you happen to have a map of the Northwest Passage?
No.
Okay. Let me
I
see.
wish I
Northwest.
could have kept that one. No,
Sorry, I should have pulled up a map of the Northwest Passage. In fact,
let
let's
me
do
get
it.
it. I'll look for it.
Okay.
Northwest.
because I don't want to give you guys just information. Like, I'd like for you to see the Northwest Passage also. So
okay, I
got
right
it.
here.
Got it.
Let me save it and share it with the community. That's the
Okay.
beauty about
Yes.
internet, right? Let me
I love
share
it. Okay. So the important part of the Northwest Passage is this. So Europe to Asia is 18 days versus 30 days via the Suez Canal. That's at 40% faster. Okay. That's huge. In terms of shipping costs, that is astronomical. That's almost half a reduction, if not more, in shipping costs. Okay. US to Asia. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Of course.
That's perfect. US to Asia is 21 days versus 25 days via the Panama Canal. Now,
Yeah.
if you remember, David, there was a big, I can't believe I'm going to use this word, but kerfuffle over the Panama Canal. I don't know what else to call it, right? It's a geopolitical skirmish, okay? But because so much of this stuff is flat out ridiculous, like kerfuffle, I think is like a good word for it. Okay, but there was geopolitical tensions over the Panama Canal, right? Because China's influence over the Panama Canal was growing so quickly that the United States was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Okay. But US to Asia that's 4 days faster. And that may not sound like a lot, but it reduces the amount of shipping that is done. It reduces costs extraordinarily. Costs in oil, costs in personnel. I mean, across the board, it lowers shipping costs in very serious ways. Now, I will say, just because the shipping costs are lowered, I don't believe that the consumer prices are going to be lowered. But the profit level for those companies is going to go absolutely through the roof. So an approximate, just an estimate, cost savings per voyage in fuel is up to $200,000 per voyage.
Wow.
Okay. So it's up to 20 to 30% cheaper than the Panama Canal route. So a single voyage might be up to $3.5 million in savings.
Wow.
Now,
that's a lot of money.
It is. And so when you're looking at that, of course it freaking makes sense. Of course it makes sense that the United States is going to fight really hard over shipping routes that, quite frankly, over time will be worth trillions of dollars. Now, I don't understand why people can't share the shipping routes, but like the Panama Canal, for example, there is one nation that is more or less in charge of it, and it's not the nation it exists in, but the United States is more or less in control of the Panama Canal. And so now we're looking at who is going to be in control over trillions of dollars worth of shipping savings.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So the other point we want the community to just be made aware of, it has to do with the Article 5 within NATO. Now, if we are, and this is just a hypothetical scenario, should it move forward? Because remember, and I do see Rampel So One mentioned something here that is very, very important, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about. And this has to do. This has to do right here. This has to do when the United States took the Virgin Island from Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I was gonna address this one. The idea that it's just in this case now is different here. If the U.S. is going to move forward into taking over or overtake the taking over by force in this case, because that will be considered as an invasion. And if any NATO member is attacked, or because this will be considered as an attack on the sovereignty of Denmark. So the question becomes is what NATO, the rest of NATO members will do. Because an attack on one member is considered an attack on all.
Yes, that is a huge question.
It is. Makes you just wonder. And the way I wanted to bring this up is from the concept, from the perspective of, if Mr. Trump is going with this taking over Greenland or whatever, is this it is preconceived notion that his people or whomever already gave a warning to other NATO members. Don't you ever dare to mention Article 5.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells you right there who really controls NATO. Because NATO, it's useless, as we all know. It's became exposed in Ukraine. That's why they're pushing this narrative of the Russian aggression in Europe and so forth. But truly, we have to ask ourselves that question. What will NATO do, hypothetically, when you start to see US forces landing in Greenland? Are they going to all act? Or are they going to just say, okay, sir, whatever you decide to do? And if the US does that, which country will be next?
So that's a phenomenal question. Would you like to listen to what President Trump said at Davos about this? Because it's worth listening to. Like I said, it doesn't, the Trump administration, any administration, but the Trump administration has certainly proved this, that you can say one thing 1 minute and then the very next minute do the exact opposite thing. So, and like I said, any administration will do this, but this one has been sort of a little bit known for it. So let me unmute it. I want you guys to hear it. Let's see.
I won't do that.
Okay. Let me refresh this so it starts at the very beginning. Oh, no, I don't want that.
Strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay, now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay, now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
All right, guys, you heard it straight from the president's mouth that he will not use force.
Well,
I'll put in the comments whether you guys believe that or not. I would love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, well, let me just make a comment here about someone putting something here. Dr. O always refer to hidden powers. Who are they?
That's a good question.
That's a good. I'm glad you brought this up. The hidden powers. You have to understand how Washington operates. What you see in the open is not what is going on behind the scene.
Yeah.
As one who was in DC, I was aware of why I was aware of this is because of what I used to do, without going into details here, because I can't. Simple as that. What I can tell you is that the power behind the scenes, I am talking about the likes of BlackRock. Okay. I am talking about the likes of JP Morgan's. I am talking about the likes of Exxon, Chevron, the key multinational organizations that have power and means to really dictate the foreign policy of the United States. That's my reference to. This is why when you see, for example, the budget of the defense, the US defense budget, why the US defense budget always goes up, never goes down, is because the foreign policy issues that emerge are not dictated by the White House or the State Department. They are dictated by the military entities, the contractors, and so forth. I used to work for one. I'm not shy of saying it because, transparency. That was back then. So I was aware of how these things work. That's what I meant by powers. This is why I am convinced this argument of Mr. Trump, we're going to take Greenland and all that, it's not Trump. He's just a tool. American president, FYI, is just a tool, no matter how you look at it. Go deep into the history of American presidency, and you'll get an idea of any American president has to follow orders. This is why any new president, when he or she, so far we always have he, a male, when he inaugurates, what is the first order of business in the White House? See, in that Oval Office, there will be a black folder. That's the only thing it's going to be in the drawer on the left side. You open that, you open it, and you see the list of what's need to be done. This is not about the American people or US foreign policy or this or that. And that list, those are the orders for the new president. That's a subtle message of saying, this is your mission. Should you decide to take it? If not, we will take you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my point. I just wanted to point this out. So just to put it in perspective. So
I love that. And then, David, to speak to exactly what you're saying, I'd like to show this image.
Oh.
So, first of all, I'd like to say that I think one of the most interesting and most, in my personal opinion, kind of evil, but one of the worst forms of manipulation in our country and in our world is the illusion of choice. Because when you go to the grocery store, and I'm using food as an example because it's something that everyone is affected by. Everyone must eat. And chances are you guys may have some of these brands in your pantry right now. You may go to the store, you may really like them, but all of these brands and many more are owned by 10 companies. And then even further up, BlackRock, for example, and Vanguard, also 2 companies own large portions of these companies as well. So you think that you have choice, right? You think that you have choice in politicians because we vote. You think you have choice in food because look at all of these different brands. You think you have choice because you go to different restaurants, right? Well, this is a different restaurant than the restaurant next door. But most restaurants and in the United States are supplied by 2 suppliers, Benny Keith and I think Cisco. And almost everyone is eating the exact same food from a different menu in a different restaurant, thinking that they're actually getting food from somewhere else, where it's literally the exact same supply chains as the same food. It's just been rearranged. And so when you look at who's actually in charge, let's say who's in charge of our food supply, right? You think, each of these individual companies, they have their own say in the food that gets delivered to you. They don't, because they're not the parent company. So look at who owns what. I think that's always the biggest question is who owns what? Who paid for what? And when you do the deep dive into who actually owns what, and then who can you not criticize? There is one very specific group and even one specific country that you can't criticize. In fact, it's very possible that TikTok was alienated
because of the pressure from that country.
Because of the pressure from that one country. So whoever it is you can't criticize, that's who's in charge. And so it's been very interesting to take a look at that. I mean, even during the COVID years, who were you not allowed to criticize during the COVID years? What were you not allowed to say? So whoever that is, and I mean, David, I am sure you are also correct that there are people we don't know that they exist. Most people who are running things, you probably have no idea that they exist. But you can at least look at some of the entities they represent and know that those entities exist.
Yeah, we will never know because it used to be still the street in Washington, D.C. If you ever go to Washington, it's called the 38th Street. 38th Street, it's an interesting one in this power game, if you understand what's in that street. So, but again, that's a conversation for another day. But suffice it to say, the big picture of this, just to go back to that point about NATO, and I am finding myself now asking.
David, we can't hear. Can you guys hear David? David,
Mm.
okay, now I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay. Oh, did somebody silence me?
I know. I guess so. I guess I didn't want to hear what you had to say.
Okay, Washington, you don't have to do this. I'm not saying something that is classified, so I still obey the law.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I obey the law. So anyway, to get back to my point in what was I saying about
I don't
NATO?
know because you cut out.
Yeah, about NATO.
Mm.
About NATO is that that's not it's not funny because this kind of stuff can happen.
Oh, absolutely.
I do
In fact, it
know.
might.
I do know what the capabilities are inside Washington to, if they want to mute this live stream, they would be
Oh,
able to.
sure. Easy peasy.
Let's not.
They can
so,
do actually hard stuff.
yeah,
That's easy
yeah.
for them.
Yeah, you're right, Copper Brand. Maybe this is a warning for me, right?
No, I
Yeah,
mean,
no.
I hope
They have other bigger things to deal with than worrying about me. So I don't work in Washington anymore. So anyway, the idea of NATO. Why I want to bring this up, I want to bring it from the perspective of, again, if we are to see what the US is about to do regarding Greenland and what the response of NATO will be, if there is any response, that gives you a glimpse into really if NATO couldn't act just on this aspect, how do you expect NATO to behave and act in a multipolar order? And that in itself, it makes me just think in terms of what lies ahead for NATO. And this is why more and more are sort of convinced that the need for NATO, it's irrelevant at this point. It behooves that entity to just dissolve and let the countries decide for themselves when it comes down to their own security. That's just the way I see it.
Yes. And so, David, I want to exactly what you're speaking to. This is a Truth Social post from President Trump, and it talks about the countries of the EU. And because that's more or less what you're talking about, right? Like whether this is whether in a sense whether this is the end of NATO, because fundamentally this is a very what President Trump here is saying is very, in a sense, distrustful of the NATO countries. So President Trump has sort of pulled back from NATO, and now all of a sudden we're getting some, and quite frankly, I think NATO needs to be dissolved. Like NATO needs to go away. And I don't know. I've heard you say something similar, David.
That is true. It's because it's outlived its usefulness. The whole reason for why it was established because of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union ceased to exist
a long time ago.
Yeah. So why? But at the same time, I will not just go with this. I'll go with the idea that what Donald Trump is saying. So if Donald Trump really has the gut, then pull the US out of NATO.
Yeah.
Put your money where your mouth is. So talk is cheap, as the saying goes for us here in the US. Show action. Sign that executive order by saying, you know what? We're done with NATO. We don't want to be a member anymore. And NATO, more power to you, how you want to move forward. And you'll see, by the time the US pulls out, most of the other countries you said, you know what? Maybe it's time for us to pull away as well. See, we don't want to be a member of NATO anymore because it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant at this point. And this is, again, where you see the big picture. And I'm seeing big picture from the perspective of not just NATO, but how a country behaves. And my reference here is to Canada. What Canada just did with China regarding the $1 trillion investments and the memorandum of understanding regarding the project. You know what we're going to be seeing soon in America? Let me tell you what it is. Sure. We're going to be seeing BYD right here in American Street. Some American is going to go to Canada and buy the BYD in Canada and just drive into the US.
Man, but you know what I want to see, David?
Yeah.
You know those Toyota trucks that are like, I forgot. Guys, put in the comments if you know what this truck is called. But it's like the impenetrable freaking Toyota truck. You can do anything to this truck. You can off road with this truck. No bells and whistles, no electronics, no nothing. It is just this like it's like the base but awesome badass Toyota truck, and it's like 10 grand.
Yeah,
I think you guys have seen them in other countries, because my husband saw them in Afghanistan, I guess. And
actually, we used to have them a lot.
Yeah, they're like, and they're
Hilux.
Yeah.
That's Matt Backey. Matt Backey shared that with us.
Yep.
Hilux.
Yep. Oh, yes. Yep.
They are
That's
known.
it. That's it.
That is correct. You don't need that. But at the same time, I am talking about what I saw, for example, with some models of BYD, the comfort, the how luxurious that is at an affordable cost.
Yeah.
That's, to me, was the key. You can afford a car like that.
Well, everything in the United States is beyond inflated price-wise.
Yeah.
Like beyond inflated price-wise. And so people are looking, I mean, if BYD does come to, obviously to Canada,
they
and
come
then
in
to the United States.
49,000 vehicle a year per year at a 6% tariffs. Not 100%.
Yeah.
6%. Do the math.
No, I mean, they're gonna obviously end up here, and I mean, I'd be thrilled for the prices of cars to go down. That would be wonderful.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous for how people now struggling to just own a car. The car loans are so beyond reach, and it becomes literally, this is now leading. Yeah. I was just talking earlier to a good friend of mine. He's like a brother to me. So we're just talking, and he informed me that, you know what, I'm going to be leaving the United States, splitting my time with overseas. I only stay here in the US for probably 3 months, 4 months out of a year. So you start to see that mindset now of some of us Americans start to think in terms of, where things are headed in America. That so-called American dream that is becoming now a nightmare.
It's long gone. It's long gone.
So let's, and I'm again, to those who might think that I am criticizing this country, you have no idea what I have done for this country. So, and I usually don't talk about my past and my whatever. But the fact that when you see where the politicians are taking the country at the expense of the average American citizen who's struggling to make ends meet, it becomes my responsibility to say something. I might not be able to do much, but I'm not going to stay silent on this.
Well, and David, they talk about this with addiction, right? The first step is acknowledging that there's a problem. If you don't acknowledge that there's a problem, there is no hope of changing it. And so that's why anybody who says we're critical, there are genuine reasons to be critical. Like the government more or less has been kicking this can down the road so long that it is a really big problem right now. So you remember Janet Yellen, right? I'm going to do a show on this. I'm shooting the show next week. But Janet Yellen just came out and compared the US economy to being worse than the third world countries the IMF has bailed out.
Wow.
Okay, that's freaking huge. And it's true. The United States is in worse shape than a lot of now we call them developing, but I think she called them third world countries that the IMF has given loans to bail out, or their economies have collapsed.
Yeah.
The United States is in worse shape economically than that. And so quite frankly, whatever other conversation is happening, that's the conversation that should be front and center. And the tariffs absolutely failed. The tariffs absolutely failed. I think it's one of the big Goldman Sachs, I think, estimated that it's 55% of the tariffs are being are being eaten by the
American
consumer,
people.
by the American consumer.
Yeah.
And so at least half of that tariff money is just extra taxes. And like, this is not disputable anymore. This is not a like, maybe someday we'll know what percentage is paid by, China or whatever, what percentage is paid by the United States. We know now that as of the last number that came out, it was 55% is actually being paid by the consumer. So we know that. We know that that's an extra burden, and that may not be called inflation or whatever with the 3%, but that's a 55% of those tariffs are being paid by Americans. So I don't know that there is a more important or pressing thing for anyone to be paying attention to than U.S. expenditures. And for Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, to come out and say somewhere between 5 and 10% of the entire national budget is fraud. Okay, that's money that is just flat out evaporating. It's going to pay for God knows what, because I don't think it's not fraud on its own. It's fraud because somebody somewhere wanted it.
Yeah, and the politicians involved. Well, you look at now what's going on in Minnesota, and you even here in the state of Texas, which things are emerging now as to the massive fraud that exists in. So far, to my knowledge, they're gonna start looking into this. From the FBI is gonna start looking into this also. There's a fraud here.
They have to.
Yeah. The Minnesota one is been, as a matter of fact, the Congresswoman Ilhan Omar now is going to be investigated. How she generated $30 million at a salary of $150,000.
Do all of our former presidents next.
I know.
Do Bill Clinton next. Do Barack Obama next.
Yeah. This is where you see the
Nancy fucking Pelosi.
Yeah. This is why we're saying what we're saying, in a sense of not about being negative. It's about exposing now the fraud that exists, because I'm an average American citizen. I'm not a wealthy. I'm just an average schmuck like everybody else. I manage my money carefully. I'm educate myself financially, so I'm aware of my expenditure and so forth. So someone else might not be lucky. But at the same time, when I go and see an average citizen who's putting 45 to 50 hours a week only for the government to take that tax dollar and send it to corrupted countries or waste it for whatever. Like, for example, we're finding out about this fraudulent daycares in Minnesota by the Somalis. I'll see, investigate everybody, give them their fair day in court, pack everybody in one plane, recuperate the money, and deport them permanently. The same will apply to the Indian nationals. The same will apply to any other nationals who is frauding the system. Simple as that. There is no ifs and buts. And this is why we are talking the way we're talking, because it's our country. Do I care to see America flourishes and so forth? Yes, of course.
Yes.
Who doesn't want that? But on the other hand, we want to be in sort of live and let live. Why create these tensions? Why create all this for what? And wasting our tax dollars instead of investing it here. So this venture of going to Greenland, what is that going to trigger now? Maybe it could work for the Europeans. That will be now the nail on the coffin for them to freaking take stand. Europeans are so pathetically weak. They can't even take stand. But that gives you an idea about who is in control. Not the Europeans, but the Americans. Before I forget, somebody put a comment. I was reading it, wanted to see the image of the Toyota. It's right here. That's the hill actually we're referring to. That's the one. So, we used to have this. I remember I used to drive some in both Baghdad and Afghanistan. Man, you drive in the mountains in Afghanistan, those roads, no issue with the as a matter of fact, I recall, without detailing much, when I was in a desert right here in Saudi Arabia.
I love this picture of you, David.
Well, how did I get there? We were driving one, and I got a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. So, and the Toyota,
really the middle of nowhere.
all you need to do is replace the tire and and that's it. In the middle of nowhere, there is no
Aw.
civilization there.
Yeah.
It's just rocks and deserts, and that's about it. So that's the
I
whole
love
idea.
these pictures of you, David. This is fantastic.
I didn't fall, so
It's like baby David.
I didn't fall, right?
Good. I'm glad.
Here
I'm
is the
glad you
funny
didn't
one here.
fall. Oh, it's a camel.
That's a camel. So
That's cool. Oh, I love
that's
these.
in the
This
desert.
is
So
fantastic. I've
yeah,
never
that was
seen
back
these
then. So
pictures.
no, I usually don't. But anyway, just to go back to that point is the idea of where things are headed, and that is my point in all this. It's just we have to understand: is this strategy feasible for us to just go and take over a sovereign nation? What for? Yeah, resources and so forth. You can't do that way. How about entering into some joint ventures with Greenland? How about? But we don't have a track
Sure.
record
Mhm.
that shows when we go to a country, we build the infrastructure.
Yeah.
We assist in developing and improving the living conditions of the locals. We
Right.
don't have a track record of that.
Well, so it's and also we got a super chat. So I want to address this in a second. But David, it's interesting because there have been other countries, and I am not pro or anti-China, okay? To be clear with everyone, I am not pro or anti. I'm paying attention to what's happening. There are things that I have very strong issues with China. Their zero COVID policy, I think, was a massive failure and actually quite scary. But China has proven that you can go into other countries, build up their infrastructure, and then have influence that way. Okay.
Yeah.
That is proven. They have shown that is true. They've shown that that's doable. The United States, though, has been a military first country for a long, long time. It's the way that the world order was set up after World War II is that instead of economically, so the United States was economically the top because of the petrodollar. Okay. So super important. The United States was at the top. And then after World War II, because the United States was the winner, right? The sole winner or whatever. It's what the United States wants you to believe, that it was like the sole winner. I don't know, David, I don't know where you went, but
I'm right here.
Oh, I can hear you, but I can't see you. Okay, there you are. Sorry.
Yeah.
But what was I saying?
You said about how China has moved forward.
So China has proven that this other way works. And I don't understand why that's not something the US, this administration is considering.
Yeah.
Like, why is the US not considering upping the infrastructure in whatever country this is? There's already in place, there's military agreements with Greenland. That's already in place, right? And if the United States wanted to mine its rare earth minerals, Denmark's already proven that it will step in China's way and not allow China to do it. But the way to do it would be for the United States to just put that investment there. Whoever invests, because it's not like you can go and like with a shovel dig in the ground and get rare earth minerals. No, it's an enormous infrastructure. It's an enormous infrastructure problem. And not only that, once you get the minerals out of the freaking ground, it still has to go to China to be processed because China has 90% of the processing infrastructure in the world. So even if the United States is going for that, there are other ways to go about it. And the administration doesn't seem to be talking about any of those. The only ones it's talking about are the really inflammatory ones.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're going to invade them, or like, oh, we're going to buy or whatever. So there is absolutely a level of distraction going on here. Yeah. And I want to talk about that next.
Well, let me share a clip with the community here.
Okay.
This is tied to what you said, why we have the problem. We have the problem because the politicians who enter into politics, their intentions are not to serve the constituents. Their intentions are to become filthy rich. And this is exactly what, here is what the Chinese president is saying. Take a listen here.
当官就不要发财，发财就不要当官，清清爽爽的，义无反顾的去当官。只要存在腐败问题产生的土壤和条件，反腐败斗争就一刻不能停，必须永远吹冲锋号，坚持不敢腐、不能腐、不想腐，一体推进，以零容忍态度反腐惩恶，绝不姑息。
That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are not willing to deal with one of the key problem that is in sort of impacting the way of life here in America, and that is corruption. Till we deal with it the appropriate way, we're not going to see, and I think, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of President Xi here. He can speak for himself, except that he's stating the facts. And the fact is, if you want to become wealthy, don't join the government.
Right.
Go in the private sector, which is nothing wrong with pursuing that aspiration of becoming wealthy. Yeah, just don't use the political office to benefit or to enrich yourself. And that's exactly the model we have in Washington.
I 100% agree with you. I think it is unconscionable for people in public office to see. Oh, you doing okay, buddy? To seek wealth. I think it is absolutely unconscionable. That is not what they're there for. They're there to serve the public. But I will say this about the American culture in general. So we have two things. We have rugged individualism, which is programmed from birth. So very recently, actually, not only in the United States, but actually a couple of European countries. So, there's the cry it out method, okay? Of like when you have a baby, you leave the baby to self-soothe when it cries, okay? That, and like the United States is one of the only places where you put your baby in another room to sleep. Right? Like you don't even sleep in a different room than your spouse, but you put your baby in another room to sleep. Okay. Now, no judgment if you did that with your child, like to each their own, all of that. But it turns out that is no longer recommended because apparently the baby isn't soothing itself. Apparently the baby in its mind is giving up hope that anyone will come and hear it and take care of it. That's soul crushing in its own way because parents weren't told that. They were told, oh, leave your baby to just cry itself out, whatever. But like, that is the beginning of rugged individualism, right? As soon as you're born, you should be able to self-soothe. You should be able to take care of yourself. It's just you. It's this like whole entire culture built around you for you. Okay. That doesn't work long term because that's not a cohesive country. That's not a country where people care about each other. That's a country where people get into public service and make millions of dollars off of these backdoor corrupt deals. Because who are they in it for? Themselves. Because the only person they can count on is themselves. And so we see it across our culture. And I think it is one of the absolute worst things that could have possibly happened in this culture is that people only look out for themselves. They only take care of themselves. It's you against the world. It's just you. And right now, one of the things that we're having is a loneliness epidemic. It is a World Health Organization came out and said the loneliness epidemic is probably going to be one of the worst epidemics we have in the coming years. And that doesn't mean you don't physically spend time around people. Have you ever been in a room full of people and still felt alone? And one of the reasons that's happening psychologically, one of the reasons that's happening is because when you're around other people, There's discord, right? There's all of this. Well, I think this about this situation. I think this about, whatever hot topic du jour. I think this about Russia. I think this about Ukraine. I think this about Israel. I think this about Greenland. I think this about whatever. And so there's discord among people. And so you don't like being with other people. But the problem is that together you are strong, and alone you are weak. Together, you're hard to control, but alone, you are really easy to control. And so we're seeing that, and I believe it's done on purpose.
All right, let's see if there are any questions here.
Wait, there's one that came with the super stickers.
All right, let's see this one.
I want to answer.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Elizabeth from Jewel Sweet 99. Hey, Elizabeth, sitting back and looking at all sides of this issue. Okay. For sure, yes. Is there any possibility or potential for this to be a double down distraction before we engage in Iran? Interesting. David, I want your take on Iran in a minute, but I want to talk about distraction first, because is this a distraction? Frick yeah. It is absolutely a distraction. Look at what's happening here. Like I said earlier, we're not talking about going and building infrastructure in Greenland. What are we talking about? We're talking about invading it, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about buying it. What more inflammatory things could we possibly be talking about in terms of Greenland? Right? Now, we also have Venezuela. We also have the freaking Epstein files. It's just like one freaking thing after another. So there's something called cognitive overload. And a lot of people call it ADHD, but it's not ADHD. It's cognitive overload. When so many things are coming at you so fast, you have absolutely no way to process it. Human beings can only process 7 plus or minus things at any given moment. Okay? I want you guys to look around your room, the room that you're in. Whatever room you're in. How many things are coming at you on a regular basis? How many possible things do you have to pay attention to? I guarantee it's a lot more than 7. But your brain literally cannot handle more than 7. And especially if they are emotionally charged, you cannot handle them. So we just had Maduro. Okay, that literally just happened, right? What was it, last week or the week before? Okay.
Yeah.
How quickly did that evaporate? The American population isn't going to do jack shit about Maduro. Like, even if they think it's wrong or they think it's right or whatever, they're not going to do anything about it, because this massive thing is now being overshadowed by Greenland. Yeah. And are we going to attack Greenland? So, David, I want to hand it over to you for Iran.
The Iran part there's much more complicated picture into that. The reason why, they are, of course, Iranians will have to play their cards right, and they are strategic about it. I mean, look at the history of Persians from way back. Tell me which force was able to defeat the Persians? None. So to the Iranians, I mean, if you think about it, and I had a conversation yesterday with someone who he knows what he's talking about. So the idea of that Iran for so many years been working on this nuclear program, you will think that by now we not have developed come on, North Korea came after, and even for North Korea, even during my days in Washington, we were aware of at that time the late what's his name? Khan, the father of the Pakistani nuclear program. I forgot the first name. Anyway, Khan, that's what it was. Even with his knowledge, that has been sort of sold to both the North Koreans and the Iranians at that time. So I was in the intelligence community, so we kind of understood. This is when we asked at that time Pervez Musharraf back when he took over, to hand him over. He's like, are you out of your freaking mind for me to turn Khan to you? Because they will turn Pakistan upside down. So the idea that Iran, which makes you think maybe why the US back down, is because they realize, okay, what if that scenario that should you attack Iran, Iran will unleash whatever it has, including the nuclear capability that they never disclosed. The same arguments can be made about North Korea. Have you ever heard that North Korea came openly and said, we have a nuclear weapon?
Yeah.
No. But we know that's why we are not taking chance with North Korea. This is about Iran.
Okay. So because you are an absolute subject matter expert, you have written books on Iran, you have written books in the Middle East, you have spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Yes, absolutely. Now, this is what I really want to know, okay? Because you are absolutely a subject matter expert on this. I really want to know what is going on here. Why? Because this situation with Iran and Israel and this whole area, and obviously say what you can say without getting us deplatformed, please. Okay. I don't care about official narratives. I never have, because they're always lies.
Yeah.
Okay. What is really going on here? Why are these tensions really escalating? What is the actual reason, in your opinion, as far as you can say without getting us deplatformed?
Well, one of the key things that comes to mind is the change in global order. We are not willing to relinquish that by any means. And when I say we, I am referring to the major players, the big pharma, the MIC, the banks, the financial sectors, the energy giants, and so forth. All of those, because those are the one that dictates the policies.
Yeah.
Where they converge, where their interests converge with, for example, with Israel, let's just put it this way, where their interests converge, it will converge on topic of interest to both. And in this case, for example, Iran. It's because Israel wants to remain the only power in the Middle East, or West Asia, that is. But they know, meaning Israel in this case, they know they will not be able to defeat the Iranians unless they're using the nukes, which, by the way, North Korea and Pakistan have threatened to retaliate if ever Israel used the nukes against Iran. But that's not the point. Iranians, the Persians can defend themselves. They proved it. They have a track record into this from way back. But the key concern that we have is that we see the global dominance is slipping away from our hands. And we want to do whatever we could to maintain that. And you do it by diverting the attention. You put the attention on something here while you are working on something else here. You throw Greenland, because it's crazy statements by Donald Trump.
So crazy. Crazy.
But behind the scenes, there are works about how can we strangle other countries financially so we can maintain the dollar, how we can pressure other countries, especially the oil-producing countries, to maintain the transactions in the US dollar.
Absolutely.
How can we limit the Chinese expansion, especially in rare earth elements and microchips and what have you. And that's usually where you see these dynamics, because now you are seeing this exposed in West Asia or Middle East. Think about what just been exposed regarding why the Saudis deported, for example, all Indian nationals from Saudi Arabia. Do you think that happened in a vacuum? No.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, just 2 days ago, the Indian wanted to cut a deal with the United Arab Emirates. Who is the ally of United Arab Emirates? Is Israel.
Yep. Put
the two and two together and figure it out. So, and this is why we are trying, because it became clear that Donald Trump, is just moving the checkers, whatever he is ordered to do so.
Oh, absolutely. He's not coming up with this himself.
No.
Unquestionably.
He doesn't think at that level. No offense to Mr. Trump. It's just a reality. That's the reality. The sad part about all this, you know what it is for me? It's the average American citizen.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what saddens me the most. I am talking about the average person who might not have the opportunity to speak out on this or even understand these dynamics. But again, till when people will be so, because I feel like most of us Americans are so apprehensive. We're so scared. We're so afraid of something. What are we afraid of? Because also we don't understand the power of people. And that gives you an idea. We have no clue about it. Even in so-called constitution, we have no concept about it. That's what saddens me the most.
You know what, David, I actually love what you just said. We don't know the power of the people.
No.
Right? Everyone is exhausted. Everyone is sick. Everyone is distracted. There's always something. And the powers that be, right? Whoever I forgot who asked, who those powers that be are, right?
Yeah.
But could they feed us poison food if we weren't distracted?
Yeah.
Right? Could they spray stuff in the air if we weren't distracted? Could they basically have tanked the US economy if we weren't distracted? Could they do pretty much any of the things that they're doing? One of the things that I find most interesting is that nobody literally almost nobody, unless you're actively paying attention, how many countries the US bombs that nobody says anything about. The news doesn't cover it. No one's paying attention. So the United States is actually, and it's not just the US. I mean, there's conflicts all over the world, but this is the country we belong to. So we should know who our country is freaking bombing. And quite frankly, most people flat out don't know. And it's hard to find. You have to go look for that information. You have to look at what freaking African country the United States is bombing.
Which, by the way, we are threatening now to bomb Nigeria.
And that's a huge deal, right?
Yeah,
and so crazy. No one is paying attention flat out to what the country is doing because everyone is so busy with their own shit.
Yeah.
And that's done on purpose because the people are who have the power. Yeah. You, person watching, you have the power to change things in whatever way that you feel called to do. One of the things that is particularly important probably should be the economy.
Yeah.
You should probably be paying really close attention to that.
That's true.
But pay attention to your country, to what your country is doing, and do something about it. And this is one of the hardest things because it's super easy to get manipulated by by all the different messages and who do you trust, who do you not, because so much is a psyop. I would love to do a show on psyops because there are some really key things to pay attention to in terms of psyop. But the number one thing to know whether you are watching a psyop or not is pay attention to your emotional state. Are you angry or are you afraid? Are you angry, afraid, or anxious? If you are any of those things, it is super likely that you are being affected by a psyop. Because the fastest way to bypass your logical mind is through emotion. So you will not go out and find other information. You're just going to be angry, afraid, or anxious. And those are the ways you are controlled. So pay attention to whatever it is. Ask yourself those questions. Am I angry, afraid, or anxious? And then dig deeper. Go look at whatever the other side of the argument is. Go look at that and go look at what you see like one or two news articles on. Go look at that because that's what they're distracting you from.
Perfect. That's the tip of the day. So here's what we're going to do from now on, Elizabeth. Anytime we do live stream, you'll be giving a tip for the day.
I love it. I have so much knowledge, guys. Human behavior.
One tip.
Okay.
Yeah, one tip every live stream we do. One tip.
Okay, that's amazing. I'll try and
I'll remind you. Don't worry. I will remind you about this one here. So, let's take some questions quickly here before we sign off. And once again, I'm not going to repeat this. I just want to say thank you for the super sticker here for Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Just let it be. Here we go. Let's take the first question here, and this from the Emancipating Poet. I like that screen name.
Yeah, this is kind of cool.
Yeah. All right, question. Can European countries take over American bases? You want to take a shot at this, Elizabeth?
No.
Or just your opinion?
No, I mean, no, they can't.
They can't. You're right.
No, they can't. Yeah,
You're
yes.
right. You're absolutely correct.
No,
because you
really
look
can't.
at Germany. You look at Germany. How many troops we have in Germany? Over 30,000. Then you go to Aviano. Then you go to England. Then you see, of course, Greece, Denmark, and all the other places. We do have presence there. So the short answer is no. I don't see that happening.
The other question is, why would you want to? So the United States is still the largest economy. Now, arguably, there's some metrics with China that you know, the United States and China are really, really coming at it about like equal.
Yeah.
The United States is still the largest economy. And for the most part, unless the country is like a persona non grata, right?
Yeah.
So like, unless it's one of the like countries the US has sanctioned, other countries don't necessarily want to piss the United States off because there are economic ramifications for that, right? Especially if you're looking at smaller countries, so many currencies are still tied to the US dollar, right? Countries fundamentally don't necessarily want sanctions because some countries have done well, like Iran did. I mean, they're still around, they're still going. Russia is actually doing well despite the US sanctions. But the United States sanctions absolutely cratered Venezuela. Absolutely freaking cratered. Their inflation went through the roof because they had to print money because of US sanctions. They didn't handle the sanctions particularly well. And so they absolutely cratered their own economy, created massive suffering for their people. So fundamentally, people are still trying to play nice with the United States. I would like for the United States to play nice back. That is my hope for the United States, is to play nice back. But there's also a like, why would you take a US base there? You know, that's opening a can of worms that I think no country at this moment is ready to tackle. That's my comments. Your take, David?
Well, no, they won't. They have no capabilities of doing that. They won't be able to. So short answer is no, they can't. That's just the only way they will do this if they ever declare an independent foreign policy, which they can't, because the transatlantic relations, you have to go into the depth of the transatlantic relations and so forth, which that's a topic for another debate. But short answer is no, they can't. Let's say thank you to Khadija here for becoming a YouTube member, which really appreciate you for that.
Yeah.
So, it is next question, and I'll leave you for you, Elizabeth. This has to do with gold.
Okay.
I think you did a video about gold.
I sure did.
So there's the question here. Buying gold and storing it in vaults, how do you get out of style totally?
How do you get it out? How do you get out of the vault if shit hits the fan?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So that is a big question. Okay. So if shit hits the fan, and this is not from me, and David, you can absolutely speak to this too.
It won't be from me either.
Well, okay, no, but this piece you can, okay?
Okay.
So having something like a bug out bag, right? Where like, or like a 4-day bag or 3-day bag or what,
which is true.
Right. So if shit hits the fan, we are screwed in so many more ways than whether we have gold or silver or not. Okay. It is getting gold out of the vaults. Okay. So there's a couple of pieces of this. First of all, okay. The amount of people who own claim over gold, right? So, you know, like on like sites and stuff, you can like buy gold, but they don't physically bring you the gold, right? You have like a stake in gold, right? You have like a paper stake in gold. You can go, you know, and hypothetically like trade it in for gold. Okay. So that is like super over leveraged. So the amount of people who have like the paper, or it's not paper anymore, it's like an email that says like, hey, you have this amount of gold, versus the amount of actual gold there is absolutely staggering. Even when we look at the gold that the United States says it has, which I don't believe, is my personal opinion, but I do not believe that the United States has the gold in Fort Knox that it says it does.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, if they refuse to do an audit, I think there's a reason. Not that they would be honest on an audit anyway, but they don't even want to do one, which is like extra shady. that
sure.
gold, it's not just like sitting there, right? It's been leased out, right? So like it's been leased out to central banks, it's been leased out to countries, so there's all these claims on physical gold. So that's not the question, but it is a super important piece of information.
Yeah.
The second part is that if shit hits the fan, man, you can trade a lot of valuable stuff. You can trade stuff like food. You can trade you can trade useful items, medicines, band-aids. You know, there's a bunch of different stuff here. And I want to, because you can't. It's the issue with gold in general. It's why we moved into a ledger system. So if you look at the financial gold has been a store of value for thousands and thousands of years. Why do we not hand it to people to buy groceries? Because it's heavy. You have to protect it. It's heavy. You got to freaking keep it in a vault, right? It's not useful. It's how we ended up with the financial system we have right now, which is paper IOUs for perceived value. Okay. So you can't, more or less, like, you can carry what you can carry and you can have what you can have. But if shit hits the fan, man, you really got to have some infrastructure around you. You got to have food. You got to have water. You got to have somewhere to go. Like it's a lot bigger than whether you have gold or not. And then in terms of store of value, like, let's say you're not talking about some sort of apocalypse. You're talking about like economically the dollar loses value, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Which the Trump administration through they're trying to get the Mar-a-Lago Accord, which is basically they're trying to devalue the dollar. So that's something they've said that they wanted to do to make the United States more competitive globally. There's a whole other can of worms that I don't think is personally going to happen. Okay. But back to gold. In terms of store of value, I have heard many very intelligent people say that it's going to 10,000 an ounce. Now, I always take that kind of thing with a grain of salt, but here's what I do think is happening. This is just my personal opinion. It is not investment advice in any way, shape, or form. But my personal observation and opinion is that the United States wants it to go up because it wants to revalue its gold. Right now, the gold that the United States says that it has, the United States says that it has more gold than any other country in the world. It is a staggering amount of gold that the US says it has. Now, if it's revalued, that is valuable to the United States, because right now I think it's still at $32 an ounce, when gold is actually selling for 4,000 something an ounce. So
4,760 as of yesterday.
Yes. And it's going up and down a little bit, but overall, I mean, it's freaking shot through the roof. It's shot through the roof as the US has printed money. So obviously people are like looking desperately for stores of value that make any kind of sense. And gold has kept its value for so long that's why people are running to it. Okay. But in that case, the United States, I believe, is trying to revalue the price of gold so that it can revalue its own holdings, not increase the holdings in gold, but revalue it at a higher dollar amount so it's worth more than it is right now. So I think there's a lot around gold that is particularly interesting. And if you're looking at like physically taking it out of a vault and carrying it around, that is super hard to do. So maybe, you know, silver is like a little bit easier, but it's heavy. I mean, metal is heavy. And it's the reason that we don't use gold and silver and metals for everyday transactions is because they're cumbersome and really hard to get out for any reason, much less like, you know, something happens like apocalypse.
All right, before we answer one last question, I want to remind you, I think tomorrow or after tomorrow, I will be having a conversation with Jayant Bahandari. So I'm going to put the link for you in the chat box. The video is still private, by the way, but I just want to give you a heads up for the community. So make sure to join me and Jayant Bahandari on the 23rd. That's when we're going to be.
We also got another YouTube member, Jules 99.
Thank you for becoming a member.
I see you.
Where is the other question? I had the other question. Somebody had a question about the treaty for the Arctic. something I know a little bit about because I wrote about it. Let me see if I can pull out that.
Well,
question.
David, you just answer the question. I'll see if I can find it.
Okay, so basically, when you look at that treaty, which won't be canceled because there are more than one treaty. As I argued in my, I think I wrote about it. It's not I think, I did write about it in the Russia book. That's when I sort of addressed that. It's known as the Arctic Council. And this is one was formed for the purpose of not a military stuff, but cooperation. And cooperation between the neighboring countries and the indigenous people. And this one, the key agreements that was involved in this council has to do with, for example, search and rescue. That was part of that. The environment. This is in case of there is an oil spill, something like this. The oil pollution preparedness in the Arctic. There was also the cooperation in the scientific domain between countries. That was what the agreement was about. However, this is what I'm saying. There is no one single Arctic treaty like the Antarctic Treaty. So, which, by the way, this one has to do with the freezing of the demilitarized zones of the Antarctica. So those are two separate things. If you go back to 1920, what comes to mind at that time? You're going to think about two countries, the US and Canada, regarding the Arctic, their Svalbard Treaty is known as Svalbard Treaty, which this one was also involved in some other aspects of cooperation. Then came the cooperation of 1988 between the United States and Canada once again. And this what's called the US-Canada Arctic cooperation. So, so far there are these ongoing conversations, but the Russians have already, they have what is called geez, I drew a blank on the name of the base, Glover base, and I disclosed all the detail about it. That is available in research. A Glover base in Arctic is equipped with up-to-date computer technologies and also surrounded by sort of long-range missiles, not only to defend it, but part of the Russia strategic response vis-a-vis the ICBM. So those are the only ones, to my knowledge, that I am aware of. But as far as the cancellation of it, no, I don't see anything pertaining to that. I hope this answers your question.
I think this was the question, David.
That's what it was.
From Remplance.
Remplance.
I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You are a fantastic viewer.
Remplance.
I love seeing you. I just don't know how to pronounce your name.
Remplance 01.
Let us know.
Remplance 01. All right. Dr. Urs, what about the treaty signed about Greenland? You didn't finish explaining why Denmark doesn't mention it. Well, Denmark doesn't mention it because it was pressured by the US to never get back to that. That was the reason why. You never hear much about it. Sort of we put the condition on the Danish government, hey, you're going to sign this, and by the way, you will never, ever reclaim this one or even bring it up. That is the reason why you don't hear much about it. A lot of people do not know much about that unless you do the research, and of course, you'll find out, oh, that's why. So I don't see the same deal going on with Greenland, because this fiasco about Greenland, I don't know. It's what Trump's saying. The Europeans will have to push very hard, which means that will be the end of the transatlantic relations.
David, let me
yes.
there's one more question, and it is physical gold holding in the USA safe from the US government? And I don't have an answer for you, but I'm just going to add this to the stage and let you make your own own judgment about that. So just
FYI. Back then, when this was signed, you know what was the key word that accompanied this particular executive order? Was this is a temporary measures. It will be just a temporary measures. No, not just FYI.
So I just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there.
Indeed. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, Elizabeth, I will remind you to give the tip of the day.
Absolutely.
So from
Absolutely.
now on, you will be
Yeah.
doing this human behavior tips for our community, one at a time, one every, and I will remind you a few days before. So you're busy.
Cool.
You have a lot on your plate.
I
so,
do.
And I will remind you of that.
Well, but I appreciate that because I've literally been, I'm a student of some of the best human behaviorists in the world.
Yeah.
I've studied under the absolute greats of human behavior for 30 years. And that's not an exaggeration.
They don't know you are certified in
yes,
human behavior.
yes. People don't know a lot of my credentials.
Yeah.
I don't widely share them, but I am easily one of the most educated people in human behavior. I'm certainly I have a lot to learn because
we all do.
Complex
we all do.
And
we all do.
You know, do interesting things, but it has been an absolute lifelong passion, and I've studied under some of the absolute greats in this regard. And you're right, I don't talk about it and I don't share that information enough. But the entire world is run by people. So understanding them is
those tips you're going to be sharing from now on will be very, very insightful for the community, because that will keep them an eye. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week for another interesting topic. Be safe and see you then. Bye.